Hello, Howard. This is Joe.
Oh, what's going on?
Can you hear me, Howard? Can anybody hear me?
Okay, Zoom's setting up the YouTube live stream.
Testing.
It's working on it. Might actually be working. Fine, you're almost there, YouTube. Okay. All right, YouTube live stream seems to be on, so we don't need to see it. Oh, where did my here we go. Got it. Okay, so all right, we're recording on Zoom and we are live on YouTube. So welcome to the 17th annual Portland Alt Jazz Workshop. 17 years. Wow. We're all that much older. So I think out of that first batch, I think Dan and I are the that are here physically are the two that were here at the very first one.
I was too.
You were here too, yes.
Richard Barrett.
Yeah, Richard Berry. Yeah. And Russ. That's right. Yeah.
Dave Rowe, I think. Not the first one.
Not the very first one. No, I don't think so. Memory is, yeah. So anyway, so we left off last year with a little conversation about how we might want to change up the agenda, the format going forward. So we have done that. I think if you've looked at the agenda, you've seen some additional topics that we haven't covered in the past. There is also a co-chair. Now that's Mel Bartels. He's a co-chair. We never had a co-chair. I did my darndest to get him to volunteer to be the chair, but co-chair as best I could do. But it's been a really good collaboration because we've had a lot of discussions about, based on the feedback we got at the end of last year's meeting, how we wanted to move forward for this year. And so I think it's really fruitful. And I'm excited that we have a wider range of topics, not just about, advanced telescope making, but, also and primarily, why are we making these telescopes? What do we use them for? I mean, they're just not, I mean, there are some people, there's one person I know of for sure who would build a telescope, put it in the garage and start building the next one. But most of us actually use our telescopes. So, so that's a part of the agenda this year, and I hope going forward. We have more of a beginner's perspective on things as well as the advanced. So it's the mix, I think, that will be more interesting and hopefully inspiring to more people. The advanced stuff can be a little off-putting because it's like, what are they talking about? People don't know how to put that into perspective. I'm not ignoring you out in Zoom. Sorry, talking to the people here. So anyway, so that's where we are, and I think I gave myself 15 minutes to talk about this, and I've only gone 5, and that's all I really have to say on that. So I'm going to launch into my presentation, which is one of the fruits of that discussions that we've had starting last year. And yeah.
Since it's a small group, should we just introduce ourselves online and in person? Got it.
Yeah. I think everyone is has turned off their video. I mean, their audio and video, some of them. So yeah, I think we can do that. Well, I'm Howard Banich, case you didn't know. We have a mobile camera.
Put that to the test.
Yeah. So, okay. And you are
Hi, I'm Sam Grums.
Sam Grums,
I'm Rob Brown.
Rob Brown. Oops, get a little tipsy there.
Dan Gray,
Dan Gray, he's our host.
Alan Slisky. Jerry Oldian.
Tim Anderson.
I'm Chris Anderson.
I'm Robert Asamendi.
Mel Bartels. There I am.
There we go.
Barbara Bajak with him.
Right, there we go. Okay, so that's us. If anyone out there wants to introduce themselves, although we can see your names underneath your phone, underneath your video. Excuse the crazy. There we go. Okay. So
Okay, Howard,
right,
can you
so I'm
can
gonna
you hear?
get
Can you
going.
hear?
I'm going to bring up my presentation,
Can anybody hear me?
their screen.
We can hear you.
Oh, good. Hey, Richard, how you doing? This is Joe.
Hi, Joe. Yeah.
I'm here.
No.
I was trying to figure out how
No.
to
The barbecue
change
will be
my
after the two presentations. We can wait.
my
Oh,
name.
it'll
All right,
taste that much
good.
better because it'll be so much hungrier.
Yes.
Notice I have.
Um, let's see, I needed to share, I needed to have this up and going. Okay. Come on, Zoom, come up. Hello. Why won't Zoom come up here? Okay, we can see. Okay, well, things are going so well, getting everything set up, and that made me nervous. So my nervousness is proving to be well-founded. I do. I do.
Oh, there's Richard. There.
Yeah. So we can see all right. Aha.
There you go. Share
See?
screen.
See, there's always someone who knows what to do. All right, so now I'm going to try to share my screen. And here we go. Okay. All right. Get that full screen. Full screen. There we go. Okay. So this is really in the wrong spot. All right. And this can be, there we go. Move it up out of the way. Okay. So observing by sketching. Yeah, I've built telescopes since I was 14, and you'll see some of them here in a few minutes. But every single one of them I built so I could observe something new or something in a different way. And as I got into it as a teenager more, I found that by sketching, I could see more. I could see more detail. I could see fainter things. I could see things I never thought I could see. So that's what this is about. Okay, now if I can get this to advance. Well, this is a lovely photo that you're looking at. All right. Page up, page down, space bar, shift, enter. All right, let's try this.
Click on the picture. And then try.
Ah, okay. There we go. There's always somebody who knows. So I'll start off by saying sketching is not the best way to observe for everybody. No one thing is best for anybody, especially in a hobby. I mean, we're out here, this is for fun. And if it's not fun, that's the only way you can't do amateur astronomy right, is if you're not having fun. I like these two pictures showing people at their telescopes and binoculars with their sketch pads. So people do sketch. I'm not the only one. And so I mentioned that I have pictures of some of the telescopes I've built and used through the years. And here they go. This one down here, you can see my cursor. This is my very first telescope. That's an 8-inch f4 on a modified English mount. It's 14 years old. I made the mirror. I had all this scrap wood laying around that my dad had left over, and I saw a picture of that type of mount in a book and thought, wow, that's the way you make a telescope. This is 1970, so this is well before I ever heard about a Dobsonian. But it worked. This is what it looks like today. This is a fixed height eyepiece Dobsonian. It's 20-inch obsession sitting on top of a equatorial mount I built. It's my old 28-inch f4. This is a 12.5-inch f8. This is my current 30-inch f2.73. This is a 90-inch Bach telescope at Kidd Peak. And this is me standing at the back end of Jimmy Lowry's 48-inch f4 in his home observatory in West Texas. Yeah, that's a telescope. That's a great telescope. I could do a presentation on just that, but that's not what we're doing here. So I like this page from one of my observing notebooks. And the reason I like it is, look at the sketch here of NGC 7331. You can see the spiral disk goes up into the notes I had for the previous object. And I ended up adding a fourth galaxy over here on the next page over. And the reason for that was that I didn't see this, and I didn't see the spiral disk coming out that far when I started to sketch. I also didn't see the dark lane. But as I sketched, it was like, oh, there's a dark lane. And I kept the spiral disk getting longer and longer and longer. And oh, look, there's a bar in this companion galaxy, or what looks like a bar. So to me, this is just an illustration on how sketching, which is just a technique for paying closer attention, can help you see more than just a glance in the eyepiece. Now, there are other ways to do this other than sketching. Our next speaker, Steve Gottlieb, he does pretty much the same thing with words. I can't do that because I think every hour into the night, I get stupider and stupider and stupider, and my words just go away. I can't describe nothing. So for me, sketching is the way to be able to capture what I've seen. So the sketch there on the right is my pencil sketch of M77 using Jimmy Lowry's 48-inch. That was quite the look. He and Steve, actually, we were observing together. They said, oh, why don't you take the next hour and just sketch whatever you want? And I said, okay. So this is what I sketched on the 48-inch. So sketching does look complicated, and it looks like you have to be really artsy and have the real flair for the artistic. That helps. Sure, that really helps. But the idea, other than just being able to see more by paying attention, is just capturing the essence of what you're seeing. I'm not trying to produce a work of art at the eyepiece, because that would require an array of pencils, an array of erasers, smudgers, this and that and the other thing. That is just too much for me to deal with in the dark. So I just make a quick pencil sketch at the eyepiece, and I finish it later, the next day or whenever, when I have the time. Which for me is a lot of fun because since I was a kid, I've been a doodler. The kids in class back in grade school, they're always kind of looking down and their pencils moving around and they're sketching rocket ships or whatever, and or maybe the kid off to the side. And that was me. I mean, I wasn't paying attention to what the teacher was saying very much. I was just kind of sketching. Okay, now this is right from my current sketching notebook, observing notebook. This was done this past spring at Chickahominy Reservoir, and you probably can't even recognize what it might be. So the Rosette Nebula. This is, and it's like this chunk over here is actually part of this chunk over here. I just started to redraw it on this side of the page. You can see how unartistic, how unfinished it is, but it's capturing the essence of what I was seeing. And this is how most of my sketches start out, how some of them stay, and very few that you'll see in the rest of the presentation are actually finished to really show as much as I really saw. Okay, like this one. Yeah, the Great Orion Nebula. This is a project that took me hours over several winters because the winters here in Western Oregon, you don't get that many clear nights. So this was a long-term project, and I was really happy to finally be able to finish it. And like it says, I have no artistic talent as what most people think when they think about sketching. Yeah, I get that. This looks pretty artistic. Um, I am not that artistic. This looks as good as it does because I cheat. I got for this and every other sketch that you're going to see, I get a photograph. I put sketching paper over that photograph and I sketch the outline of the nebula. I plot where the main stars are, and now I can sketch and make a final drawing that looks so good. I couldn't do this freehand at the eyepiece in a million years. Oh, good, that's showing up nicely up there. So yeah, so this isn't about art. This is about seeing everything you can. And that's what I try to tell people who are even remotely interested in trying their hand at sketching at the eyepiece. Because if you want to see everything you can see that your eyes and your telescope are capable, sketching is a great way to go if you want to do it. If you don't want to do it, you're not going to see nothing because you'll hate it. This is M82 with my old 28-inch. And I hear people say, well, sketching takes too much time. It takes too long. I want to see so many things when I'm out under the stars. There's so much to see. And boy, do I get that. Um, I back in the 90s, I did a couple of the Astronomical League's observing lists, the Herschel 400 and the second 400 objects, and then the galaxy clusters. I mean, those are just hundreds and hundreds of objects. And I got into the rhythm is that I want to see as many of these as I can every night. I didn't sketch any of those. I just wrote a cryptic note that I saw it, and it looked kind of like this, and off to the next one. If I didn't see 20 objects a night, I wasn't doing very well. So yeah, in that type of scenario, and a lot of people observe that way. Yeah, sketching does take too much time. Sketching slows you down because it forces you to pay attention. And like I said, that's kind of the whole idea. Now, this sketch of M82 is one of my most remarkable things I've ever seen. This is from Steens Mountain in 2015, early in the morning in, I think it was October of 2015. And, it's one of those moments when the sky got out of the way. The atmosphere just stopped doing all the crazy stuff that it usually does. And look at all that crazy detail. I couldn't believe it. It was like laciness everywhere. This doesn't really capture it as well as the eyepiece view. Um, and this is the sketch that started my career of writing for Sky and Telescope, M51. This is another one of those sketches that took several years over many nights, over the very best nights to put together with my 28 inch. As I mentioned easier, I keep it earlier, I keep it easy. I make it as easy on myself as I can at the eyepiece while I'm sketching. I have white unlined paper in my notebook, and I have a mechanical pencil using 0.7 millimeter lead. There's an eraser on the end, and that's all I use. If I need to smudge something, I'll use my finger. Again, I'm just trying to capture the essence. And also, again, all these sketches you're seeing are the finished versions. None of these sketches, except for that one on the rosette, were done at the eyepiece. Yeah. This is the one I hear all the time. I can't even draw a straight line. Anybody thinking that? Okay, there's a couple. Yeah. There's always some people who that's what comes to mind. I can't even draw a straight line. And you know what? I can't either. Drawing straight lines freehand is really hard. If you have a straight edge, sure, zip, there you go. The fortunate thing, I also like to point out, is that in all the things I've seen in the night sky, there's only one thing I've seen that is actually really straight. And that's the relativistic jet coming out of the middle of M87. And that's only for the first half. Then it gets wiggly at the end. So if this is holding you back, not being able to draw a straight line, you can relax. You can sketch because astronomically, you're not going to run into straight lines. And this is a sketch of M33 this was in last November's issue of Sky and Telescope. I wrote an article. In this November's issue, there's another article about M33, which I think is a lovely compliment. I think those two go together really well. Okay, this is M8, the Lagoon Nebula. That picture you saw at the beginning, me sitting at the telescope pointing up at the beautiful Milky Way. This is the rough sketch I was drawing then has been turned into this finished pencil drawing. Yeah, this looks pretty artistic too, but this again is not what it's about. You know, a lot of these things that we sketch that are in the night sky are very beautiful. I mean, and if you can capture their essence even a little bit, your drawing is going to reflect that, and it'll look great. Even if there's lines going everywhere, which way, like in my rosette, you can capture that essence, and you can keep that in your notes forever as a recording of what you saw. This is one of my favorite pages. This is July 21st, 1994. I was at home using my 8-inch f4 telescope. This is also the night of an RCA general meeting here in Portland. And just as the meeting was about to begin, a guy, one of their members, burst into the auditorium and says, "Oh my God, you can see the SL9 impacts on Jupiter." And everyone was stunned, just stunned. And the meeting concluded quickly and everyone left. And so I went home and I started making these sketches. I mean, these are a couple of dates, 21st, 23rd, and 25th. Oh my gosh. I mean, if you saw it at all, you remember how incredible it was. I love this page because I look at this and go, wow, that's more than I remember seeing. If I just had to go by memory, I wouldn't have remembered all that. That was such an exceptional event. Okay, so some things are really hard to sketch, like Saturn. There's an undeniable pull to be able to at least attempt sketching Saturn because it is so out of the normal realm of what we see every day. It is just such an exceptional sight. I like this particular sketch of Saturn. I have a lot of them because this is one of two times I unambiguously saw Encke's gap, Encke's division. This tiny hairline curve right at the very tip of the visible rings. And it helps too because the rings are kind of dusky right up to it, and then they're brighter right on the very rim. But I could actually see that dark line of Encke's gap. And it was thrilling. This was at an Oregon Star Party back in the 90s when Saturn was nearly up at the zenith. It was just before dawn. This is with the 20-inch obsession. And it was, again, one of those nights the scene was just solid. This is at over 1,000 power. So it looked big in the eyepiece, just like it does here on the screen. Come and hail Bob. Yeah, I had no idea what the area around the pseudonucleus of a great comet would look like. And when it came along, it was like, holy crap, it looks like a water sprinkler to shoot stuff out ahead of the, this is the pseudonucleus here. I mean, and every night it looked a little different. And so I have a series of sketches showing those changes over time, which again, is just a great record. Yeah, if you're a photographer, you capture all this and, back then on film and now on your digital cameras, and get a lot more detail. And if that's what you're into, it's great. But I'm into what I can see with my eyes. So this is what gets me going. And then Mars. Mars is a bitch. It's never big enough. The detail is never distinct enough to see well. Even though these two drawings seem to imply otherwise. Mars is hard to see much detail on. Now, this bottom sketch, this is from 2003, and it's at Oregon Star Party when Mars is at its great perihelic opposition. It's the closest it's going to be in our lifetimes. And this sketch was made right around the time of closest approach, 2:50 a.m. You can see all the filters I use. I use a monoviewer with the eyepiece at 10 millimeter radians and at 625 magnification. Even so, that was hard to see. But I'm really seeing Olympus Mons right here, this little white patch. That was probably the coolest part of that particular observation. This was my 20-inch obsession. This was the last year of the obsession before the 28-inch. And this is probably the most difficult sketch I've ever made, which probably you're thinking, why? Why? It's just a bunch of dots. Well, this is M7, a beautiful bright open cluster in Scorpius. These stars aren't hard to draw. This is a globular cluster, which is actually, I think it's NGC 6445 or something like that. I could be wrong, but anyway, that's on the other side of the galactic core. So it's a miracle we can see this at all through the Milky Way. Anyway, drawing the Milky Way background, that's what made it so hard. I had to invent a new technique to be able to do that. Invent a new technique to me, anyway. And if anyone's ever interested, I'll be happy to share what that technique is. But it took a long time, and it was really tough to do. But I like how it turned out because it does give the sense of the billowy nature of the Milky Way. And this is with the 30-inch, f2.73. Thank you, Mel. Okay, and this, I really like this. And this is M5, the globular cluster M5. Now, most people don't realize that there are two really bright variable stars in M5. Jerry's nodding knowingly. He knows.
I read your article.
He read my article. There you go. And you can see, I'll just kind of, oop, there we go. You can see him go back and forth. And it's just that dramatic in the eyepiece. The difficult part is that those two variables seldom are at their brightest and dimmest at the same time. They're like a day and a half apart in their cycle. So usually one's bright and the other isn't. But if you know exactly where to look, you can tell. And every time I look at M5, I check, and I think the last time I checked, they were both at minimum. Where'd they go? But this is really fun. I mean, because globular clusters, if you really paid attention to all the individual stars night to night and how bright they were, you would see this bubbling of variable stars within globular. They're called cluster variables back in the old days, but are Lyra stars for the most part. Some Cepheids like these two are. And to be able to record that on two pieces of paper, it's like, wow, okay, that's cool. And this one, this is just look out here with this little hand-drawn arrow with this little dot, star-like dot. That's a quasar that is way out there. I mean, way out. Look at the Z, 3.911. Light travel time of 12.1 billion years, gigalight years, what the real astronomers say. And the co-moving radial distance, as best as I understand, because when I look up the definition online, in one place is different than another place. But what I gather is that co-moving radial distance is how far it is away from us now due to the expansion of the universe. So 23.662 billion light years away. Yeah. So that was when I went after this one, I thought I'd be able to see it, and I did. It wasn't hard. It was averted vision. But the sensation of seeing that in the eyepiece and those extremely old photons making an impression on my eye brain system, it just gives me shivers.
So did you use
This was the 28-inch f4. Okay, and this is great. This is sketching is just not for us amateurs. This gentleman is Dr. Ron Buda. He was a professor of astronomer at the University of Alabama for many years. He's retired. He is an expert on the morphology of spiral and oval disk galaxies. And basically what that means is that he studies why do galaxies look the way they do? What forces are at work to make this spiral look this way, but this other spiral look different? And why does this oval galaxy look this way and another one looks different? So that's what he studied. He was a student of Gerald de Vacalauris, who was also into galaxy morphology. And all through his graduate studies and his career as a professional astronomer, whenever he could, he made a point to actually sketch what he was studying after the cameras are taken off the telescope. So he's looked through some really big telescopes, and he had a web page on the University of Alabama site with all of his sketches, which are now gone. The sketch on the right here is one of my sketches that I thought would just be appropriate because it shows a bunch of different shaped galaxies. But he must have them somewhere. I had the pleasure of meeting him this past spring when our next speaker, Steve Gottlieb, and I traveled to West Texas to meet up with Jimmy Lowry and observe with his 48-inch. As it turned out, Ron was there. He had 5 nights observing time on the 82-inch Otto Struve telescope. observing time for him to sketch. No cameras, nothing but his eyeball and some eyepieces and an 82-inch telescope. Now, I mean, come on. That's awesome. Now, and so he invited us to join him on his last night. And so we did. We just, we couldn't say yes fast enough. Now, Ron is a gentleman's gentleman. And he's soft-spoken, but when he starts talking about galaxies, he gets excited. And when he starts talking about galaxies after looking at them in the eyepiece of an 82-inch telescope, he's just bubbling over. And we got this master class in galaxy morphology that night that you just couldn't get anywhere else from anybody else in that way. At one point in the evening, we thought, well, just for fun, let's point the scope at the Corona Borealis galaxy cluster. What's that? 2065, I think. And so we were expecting to see lots of galaxies, of course. And so the telescope operator, who was one of the astronomers there at the University of Texas McDonald's Observatory, was also a friend of Jimmy Lowry's. He moved the telescope over there, and we look in, and there is probably 100 per eyepiece view. Yeah, I've never seen anything like it. When Ron looked, he yelled with glee. It was wonderful because we all did. So just because you're a professional astronomer doesn't mean you don't get excited. And it was just a great experience. Right? Steve remembers it very well, I'm sure. And another thing I like about sketching is that I can get an overall view of an object that I can't see all at once in my eyepiece. I can draw pieces of it and then stitch them together like the Veil Nebula here. I mean, this is three degrees this way and 3.5 this way. That's a big chunk of sky. It barely fits in the low power eyepiece of my 8-inch f3.3 telescope. Just fits. I don't see all that detail. This is done all with 28-inch f4. One field of view at a time. And which was really cool about this is that half of this drawing was done during the summer, but the other half was done during the early spring when it's rising in the east. Now, when it's rising in the east, it's at a different orientation in the eyepiece than it is during the summer when it's nearly straight up ahead. And that different orientation by itself went, oh my gosh, I never saw that before. Where did all this come from? I had no idea I could see any of that. And this is the southern blowout region. Oh my gosh. And here, this is a southeast, southeastern knot is what it's called. This is an area, this little smidgen here, this is where the blast wave of the supernova is just reaching a pre-existing cloud of dust and gas. And so it's just starting to light it up. In a couple hundred years, this is going to look very different. I mean, I wish I could live that long so I could see, just so I could see that. So why do I build telescopes? So I can see all this stuff. I wouldn't have seen half of the details I've been able to if I didn't sketch. It's like I said, my words fail me during the night because I get tired, my intellect shuts down. I can write fine during the day and the early evening, but if you looked at my observing notebooks, you'll see my sketches and I write a few little notes. Those notes get more and more cryptic as the night goes on. It's almost funny. But that's me. I mean, other people don't. And as I mentioned, Steve will be talking here soon about many of his observations, and he always has the words to describe what he's seen, and it's a wonderful thing. So I'm interested in looking at the things that I want to see. I'm not really interested in seeing as many things as I can in the sky. I like to look for details and bright objects, as well as to try to see some dim objects that I'm interested in. Um, I'm just following my nose. I mean, I don't have a grand master plan. So when you see an article of mine in Sky and Telescope, it's just that's where my nose is pointing, probably a year before that article came out. And that process of writing articles is where all these finished sketches come from. I wouldn't go to the time, through the time and the technique to make these finished sketches if I wasn't going to have them published. That's my motivation for that. If that never happened, my sketches would just live in my notebooks, and they would mostly still be really kind of sketchy looking. But those finished sketches are inspiring to me. I'm inspired by them. I'm inspired by what's out there and then what I can see. And so really that connects me more deeply with the rest of the universe. I mean, we live in this little planet. It's very nice, for the most part. And yet to be able to see out like we can, we have sometimes our atmosphere is transparent and we can see out there. It's just a wonderful thing. It blows me away sometimes. And I'm going to end on this slide. This is a quote from Jennifer Willis. This is from an article that she had on the Sky and Telescope website back in 2021. And this is the very last thing in her, I think it's the very last sentence in her article. The night sky brought me back to myself. Now, that really resonates with me because there's been times in my life, decades now in the past, where the only thing that kept me sane was going out at night and observing. Because that just helped me put my cares and worries and all my earthly problems into a perspective that was more manageable. And sketching was a big part of making that more manageable, because it just got me out of myself, looking out, what can I see? What is in the universe that I can be inspired by? And there's a paradox to that too, because the more I've done that, the easier it's been for me to look inside myself. And so, yeah, the night sky did bring me back to myself through times of a lot of stress and trouble. And even now, I've had a very happy life for the last 25 years. Very happy life. Every time I'm out, I'm sketching, I'm seeing what's out there. Yeah, the night sky brought me back to myself, and I've been able to stay there. So thank you for your attention here and out in all you Zoomies. If there are any questions, we can take those now. Yes, Rob.
You said that you cheat by locating stars prior to coming to the eyepiece. I think that's what you meant. But you cheat is what you said.
Yeah.
I object to that. Not in that I think you shouldn't do it. I think you're doing exactly the right thing. And I don't think it's cheating. I think it's necessary, especially since you're not doing art. You're not creating an artistic impression of what you see. You're trying to document some. And getting the stars right is crucial to some of this stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
So why not? Why not print them out, trace them through tracing paper, erase the ones that you didn't actually see, if that comes to it. But it ain't cheating in this context. No way.
For some people, it is.
Yeah, well,
that's why you say
their
that.
own problem.
Yeah. For me, it isn't. No, not at all. It saves a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, I have another phone.
Another bone to pick? Oh no.
You say you do this for yourself,
Yeah.
but think of how many people have seen your work now. I think it's so wonderful.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I don't know if anybody, everyone out there heard what Dan said, but he just gave me a wonderful compliment. That I do this for myself. My motivation is for myself, but a lot of people have seen my work in the Sky and Telescope, and that's inspiring to people who have seen those articles. And yeah, I get email. Not a lot of email, but I get email for almost every article. And sometimes most of the time people are expressing their gratitude for the article in one way or another. Every so often someone will say, I have a bone to pick. You made a mistake on blah 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 blah. Which is true. I've made a few mistakes in these articles, and so which is fine. Just another example that shows I'm a human being. So anyway, yeah, thank you. That's really nice. Yes. I think there's a question here in chat. Well, this is from Cindy. Cindy is going to give a presentation about sketching tomorrow, I believe. Tomorrow or Sunday, I forget.
Oh,
Yeah,
I have a
okay.
question for you.
She is the Astronomical League's coordinator for their sketching awards. So she's really good at this. And she wants to know what items are in my toolkit for my finished sketches. Well, a lot more than just a mechanical pencil with an eraser on the end. I use two mechanical pencils. One is HB with 0.7 millimeter lead, and the other is a darker lead. And off the top of my head, I can't remember what the designation is. I have a series of erasers. The one I use the most is what I call my pencil eraser. It's basically about 2/3 the length of a pencil, but it's all eraser inside, and you can scoot it in and out to get the length you want. And I can shape the end to be as sharp or as dull as I want it to be. I have an eraser pad. It's basically a cotton bag full of eraser shavings, which is really good at getting rid of smudge marks like fingerprints or just some some areas on the sketch that need to be lighter. So, I'm forgetting a couple of things. The biggest one, which is brand new in the last year, is a Kleenex. And folding a Kleenex into about a 2-inch by 3-inch square and rubbing that on areas that I want to look nebulous, where I have very sketchy looking lines, that smears out the graphite on the paper so beautifully. I don't know, I'm probably the last one to come across that little technique, but it works great. And yeah, so yeah, I think that's probably the tools I use the most. I have others that I don't use. I have an eraser template as it's a little about 2 by 3 inches rectangular, has all these different shaped openings that you can put over a drawing and then erase select areas. I don't do that because the shaped eraser works so well. Yeah, so there's some more questions here. I've heard that you'll memorize some of what you see atop the ladder to Jimmy's 48-inch, and then when back on the ground, draw it. Is that true? Do you not take your pad up the ladder? That is true, Scott. Except for very rare instances like that drawing of M77. I did have my notebook up there for the hour they gave me to sketch. The way it works when we're at Jimmy's 48-inch is that there's usually 3 or 4 of us at most, and we'll take turns scrambling up his 14-foot ladder. He really needs a 16-foot tall ladder because when it's pointing straight up, it's a little scary at the top. we'll take a look. I'll come down, I'll sketch what I remember, and then I'll go back up. I'll sketch what more things that I remember. So I'll go up 3 or 4 or 5 times to make a sketch that way. If there's a lot of detail. Sometimes there's not that much detail to memorize, and so I only need to go up once or twice. But it's actually turned out to be a good technique for me in general because observing with my own scopes and sketching, the first step I do is look at the object for 5, 10, 15 minutes before I start sketching. And then when I do start the sketch, then I have in my mind what it looks like really well. So I can get it down on paper fairly well and go back and forth, add details, use the eraser, blah, 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 back and forth. So yeah, what you've heard is correct. Okay, what tools do I use to get the scale at the eyepiece same as the paper sketch if you do pre-work? I use my printer at home to print out a nice photograph about the scale that I want. And I have these huge pads of sketching paper. They're about, I don't know, 3 feet by 2.5 feet. And I put that photograph underneath the paper and I'll sketch the outlines of the object and I'll place the brightest stars and then I'm off to the races. Alternatively, if what I'm drawing is going to be really large, like that sketch of the Veil Nebula, the actual sketch is about 3 feet by 3 feet square. And so what I did is I bought an art projector, printed out a tiny little photo of the Veil Nebula, put it into that projector, and it projected an image of the veil on my big piece of paper. And then I just traced that to get the general outlines and place the brighter stars. That worked like a charm. The only difficulty with a really big sketch like that is that I can't scan it. I don't think there's scanners that big. So I have to photograph it. And photographing the sketch is a bitch. Only because it's so hard to get the entire sketch evenly illuminated. It's so hard to get rid of a gradient. Now I could probably use, astrophotography tools to do that. I just haven't taken the time to learn or even to find out if it's possible. Okay. Okay, another question. How do I keep my paper dry with high humidity when doing a long drawing at the eyepiece? Well, it's a fight. There's almost every night here in Western Oregon is dewy. A couple nights ago I was out and it wasn't dewy and I couldn't believe it. So to keep my notebook page as dry as possible, it doesn't stay completely dry. I close the notebook when I'm not actually, drawing or writing in it. And when also on my observing table, I have a blanket and I put that underneath the blanket to help keep it dry. So only when I'm actually doing something in the notebook do I open it. But still, sometimes the paper gets a little damp and I have to be careful. And when the paper gets wet, I don't erase anything because the eraser will just rub right through the paper. So, okay.
You just get shut down at times. It's like, okay, done. Or
Well, not for observing.
right.
For sketching, I'll just go to another page that's drier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I get my notebooks are about 5 by 7.5 inch notebooks, unlined paper. They're for sketching. And they fit my hand really well. I have a really nice leather cover they fit into that I got at the Saturday Market in Eugene in 1980. That was handmade. It's really nice. Got a matching checkbook cover as well. So it's just a matter of, um, yeah, if the page that's been open is too wet, I just go to the next page and keep going. So all except my very first sketching notebook or that size, 5 by 7.5. No, it's 8.5. Excuse me, 5 by 7.5, 8.5. My very first sketchbook when I was 17, is a big sketchbook, that is, just crammed with sketches, and it's all very unorganized, but that's where I started. Okay, so that's all the questions, I think here. Oh, yeah, Robert. Yeah.
The M7 sketch, what's the deal?
What's the deal with it?
Said ask if we want to know how it works.
Oh, okay. How did I do that? Okay. Well, let's see. Why don't I go back to that sketch? There we go. Let's get this out of the way. Okay, so what I did, again, I'm all these finished sketches are drawn on really nice big sheets of tracing paper. And because I was just trying to figure this out, I came up with an idea. What I did is that after drawing all the bright stars on one side of the paper, I flipped it over and made the Milky Way stars on the other side. So if I screwed it up, which I did several times, I could just erase it without erasing the stars of M7 at the same time.
Mirror image.
Yeah, and because it's tracing paper, then it was at I made the paper the same size as my scanner bed, so I could scan it, and so it scanned perfectly well.
Those dots.
These are all individual dots. Probably, I think it's 2.3 zillion.
Zillion.
So yes.
Did you use a technique where you're just like that,
Yeah,
like tapping like
yeah.
Okay.
And that took some getting used to, because a lot of the erasing I had to do is because those little, hopefully, dots were turning into little lines. Yeah, which is really easy to do. So getting a technique where I could just make little dots.
It's also very difficult to do a random pattern.
Oh,
You wind up drawing lines.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, there was so much erasing going on.
What do you mean random? Every one of those little stars. Oh, every one of them is accurate to the RA. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're precisely in the right location. No,
Using J2000 or J now.
I was using J Howard. Yeah. So anyway, so that's the deal there, and that's yeah. So I was really happy with the way that worked out. In fact, that article that this sketch appeared in was the first time I didn't have an actual photograph of the object as part of the article. The inverted version of this image was the lead image of the article. Because when I was putting it together before I sent it in, I had them both in there, a photograph and the sketch, and it was like, no, they're too close together. There's just not enough difference there to really warrant having both. So I said, okay, I'll just go with the sketch and see what my editor says. And she went for it. So, okay, let's do a time check here. 5:44. All right, so that means, okay, that means I went really quick. That's fine. So why don't we just call it good for here. I'll stop my share. And let's see, we'll come back in about 15 minutes and hear Steve's presentation. And I'm trying to see if I can stop